All right, it is time for our second speaker of the night. Before he moved to the United States sometime in the last century, from his beloved Ireland, one of his work colleagues told Conor that he'd probably join some weird cult. Conor joined Toastmasters and got hooked. One of less than 90 accredited speakers in the history of Toastmasters, this man really believes in the benefits of Toastmasters. He works diligently to improve his skill set, which is why he is currently close to finishing his second DTM, which his wife says stands for Delirious Toastmaster. Conor's mission as a keynote speaker is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile. So sit up straight, pick that piece of broccoli from your teeth, get out your iPad, iPhone, smartphone, tablet, or what do they call those things? Yes, pen and paper, and start taking notes as Conor Cunneen talks to us on adding humor to your presentation. Conor.
Thank you, Ed, for that. I'm just out walking the land at the moment, and I just found this camera here in front of me. Is it working, the camera? Let's see. Hey, gang, it is working. It is working. Conor Cunneen, IrishmanSpeaks here. Ouch, sorry, that hurt. What I want to speak to you about tonight is adding humor to your presentation. Now, Barbara did comment earlier that setting expectations was a critical element of good customer service. Tom, in an email sent to me earlier today, said he's looking forward to a great presentation. I want to assure you that he wasn't talking about my presentation, okay? I'm not sure what he was talking about, but it wasn't my one. What I would like to talk to you about today is how you can actually add humor to your presentation. And what you will see is that you don't have to be incredibly creative yourself in adding humor to your presentation. It's all around you. You actually have people laughing on a regular basis yourself that you don't pay attention to, which I will encourage you to do. You hear funny things from time to time that you don't pay attention to, that I will encourage you to do. And also what I would say to you is that when we're doing this presentation here this evening, we'll have some great crack. Yeah, crack, that's what I said. Oh, or let me explain something, gang, here. Crack in Ireland is the synonym for fun. Okay, so I don't know if anyone here has been to Ireland and in a social situation, you almost certainly would have heard the word crack. And basically it means having great fun. So for instance, if I go back to Ireland, hopefully in June, July of this year, one of the first questions I will be asked is, Conor, how's the crack? Or Conor, where's the crack? That basically is one of the major expressions. It's one of the kind of greetings really in Ireland. And in fact, I mean, what happened the last time I was there, someone said to me, we had great crack down with Father Murphy down at the church last night. Sounds strange, okay? But so we'll have some great crack here. By the way, if you're interested, crack is spelled C-R-A-I-C, but it's spelled pronounced crack. Now, the basic idea behind tonight's presentation is I'm going to help you to add humor to your presentation. And out of curiosity, just by raising hands, how many of you think that you are not funny? By raising your hands, how many of you are not funny? Okay, we got a group of comedians here, okay? All right, this is good, all right. So one of the things about adding humor to your presentation is that it is a process. And does anyone have any idea how many comedy writers Stephen Colbert has for his show? Anyone want to guess? You can shout it out. Ed, you're on mute. 5, 10. John Jack Brennan is way closer. He probably has about 14 or 15 comedy writers for his show. Now, here's the thing, gang. If someone like Stephen Colbert or Conan O'Brien or James Corden have 10 to 15 writers for their show, you can see how difficult it is to come up with humor. So you're saying, well, what am I going to do? But here, Barbara mentioned that we laugh about 15 times a day. Now, What I'm hoping is that most of you have only laughed about 13 times so far today, so we've got 2 more laughs to come, okay? But the thing is that if you laugh, let's say 15 times a day, I would bet that most of you cannot remember what you laughed at today. Most of you cannot remember what you laughed at yesterday. But think about this, gang. If you were to capture just once a day something that made you laugh, at the end of the year, you would have 365 pieces of humor, or 366 pieces of humor. Now, I'm not saying you're going to be able to use them all in your presentations, but what I am saying is that if you start capturing these kind of humorous elements, let's say you've got a whole universe of 365, surely there's going to be 5%, which would be about 18 pieces of humor that you can use in your Toastmasters presentations. And here is the thing about humorous presentations. There's a big difference between humorous presentations and stand-up comedy. The stand-up comic, I do a small little bit of stand-up comedy, and it's I do just so I can have a cold sweat at the back of my neck kind of thing. Each of you who can recall when you went to Toastmasters for the first time and did your icebreaker, there's probably cold sweat in the back of your neck. When I go to comedy club I still have cold sweat in the back of my neck. I do it for 2 reasons. One is to, as a professional speaker, I want to be uncomfortable and not just get too blasé about things. And what it also does, it allows me to improve my material, although the material I would do at stand-up comedy might be slightly risque for a Toastmasters club. And the word there that I'm underestimating is slightly. But however, but the point is that if you can recall and adapt the kind of material that makes you laugh, or that you have said that will help people to laugh, that is going to be gold dust for you. And I'll give you some additional illustrations on that in a few minutes' time. Now, what I will do is, let's see what we got here. Hopefully share screen is working okay. Right, now, why am I not appearing on this here? Hold on. Conor, come here. All right. Let's see. I apologize. Talk amongst yourselves there for the next 45 minutes, okay, while I solve these technical problems. Okay, we're going to share screen a different way. All right. That kind of messes up some of the presentation I was going to do. I'm going to talk to you about adding humor to your presentation. Now, I want to say to you a public service announcement as well. Any of you who are suffering from heart failure or have a bad breath, I would ask you to be very careful during this presentation, because there may be a few good laughs in it, and we don't want anyone to just kind of croak during the Toastmasters meeting. That wouldn't be ideal by any standards. Now, what I want to talk to you about here is the way the brain works when it comes to humor. So those of you who are interested in neuroscience, you will know that the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the orbitofrontal prefrontal cortex, and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex are parts of your brain. You may know that. I don't really know that. Okay. However, but what I do know though is that scientists will tell us that one of the reasons why we laugh and feel good about laughter is that their endorphins are swimming around in our brains. And the endorphins are kind of known as a feel-good chemical. And when you laugh, the endorphins kick in and they start swimming around your brain. That's what scientists say. I want you to know that I don't believe that. What I actually believe is swimming around your brain is not endorphins, but endorphins. Okay? And the reason why I say that is that when you think about it, when was the last time you smiled when you saw an endorphin? Okay, no one did. Okay, when was the last time you smiled when you saw a dolphin? Just a couple of seconds ago. All right, so the But no, that's a bit goofball. But I mean, there actually is a logic to why humor works. It kicks in our neurotransmitters in our brain, and it does make us feel better. Now, what I want to do now is I want to show you a little video clip of a presentation I made to a sales group prior to COVID, and we will then have a little post-mortem on this sales clip. Okay, so let's see now. We're going to stop the share for a moment and find another screen somewhere and pray that it is there. And again, I say to you, good Lord, hold on, we've lost it again. How is it all of these things are always set up just before the meeting, and then when you go to the meeting, they're not there at all? So this is a little story, and we'll then do a post-mortem on it, and we will have some learnings from it as well. So come along. Where are we now? Share screen, go back to share screen, and yeah, optimize. Okay.
Most of you, irrespective of how well your business is going, you would, I'm sure, like to build customer relationships even more, yeah? You would like to have a better bond and a better brand image out there, no matter how good it is, right? Okay, right. Consensus on that. It doesn't happen, though, just because you want it to happen. You've got to work and plan to make it happen. I'll give you a little story about Patrick just to illustrate this. Patrick was a good-living Irishman who ran into some financial difficulties due to gambling, womanizing, and drinking. So, Diana, the Irish definition of good living is pretty broad, as you can see here, all right? Patrick's granddad died. Patrick goes out to the granddad's house to clear out the house, and then he goes out to the garage, and he starts clearing out the garage, and he brushes against a lamp. And out of the lamp pops a... No. A leprechaun, that's right. Get with the program. Get with the program. The leprechaun says, Patrick, I'll give you one wish. And Patrick says, leprechaun, if you let me win the lottery, I'll pay off all of my debts, I'll give the rest of the way to charity and make a major contribution to the Aurora University Sales Institute. So Sean is on board with this kind of thing, right? So the leprechaun says, okay, I'll let you win the lottery, although I advise you not to buy the lottery ticket in Illinois, because you mightn't get paid in Illinois. So Patrick goes off, and 1 week goes by and there's no lottery win. And 2 weeks go by and there's no lottery win. And after week 3 and no lottery win, Patrick goes out to the garage again. He brushes against the lamp, and out of the lamp pops a... Leprechaun. Hey, a learning audience, I love it, all right. And the leprechaun says, yes, Patrick, what do I do for you now? And Patrick says, leprechaun, you told me I'd win the lottery. And the leprechaun looks at him and he says, Patrick, give me some help here. At least buy a lottery ticket. That's a goofball story. It's an old story, but actually is a story with a moral for everyone here in this room. And the moral is that just because you want something to happen doesn't mean it's going to happen. Just because you want to build customer relationships better than you already have doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Okay, that is actually a story I tell nearly at all of my presentations, business presentations. A few things about it. It's a story with a moral, and there's a moral in it for you as well here in this Toastmasters District 12. And the moral is that just because you want to be funny doesn't mean that you're going to be funny. Just because you want to win the humorous speech competition does not mean you're going to win the humorous speech competition. You got to take active steps to implement what is needed to add humor to your presentation. And just out of curiosity, raise the hands for a second. How many people here have actually competed in Toastmasters competitions? Okay, So all of you are experienced Toastmasters. You know what it feels like to be robbed in a Toastmasters competition, yeah? Right. Okay, hitting the sore point there. But you've got humorous speech competitions in District 12, I presume, have you? Do you run those? Yeah, okay. If you want to win the humorous speech competition, not sure when it's going to be happening now, whether it's in the next couple of months or whether it's actually another 9 months or whatever it would be, is you're not going to win it by starting to write the humorous speech just 3 weeks before the event. What you got to do is you got to decide, I'm going to win this. Be like the leprechaun saying to Patrick, you got to win buy the metaphorical lottery ticket. And buying the metaphorical lottery ticket means you got to put some effort into it. Now, a few other points about that story. As I say, I can literally tell that story almost to any audience. If I'm speaking to a group about employee engagement and the manager wants to improve employee engagement, I can tell that story and say, gang, the moral is just because you want to improve employee engagement doesn't mean it's going to happen. That was to a sales group. Just because you want to improve sales doesn't mean it's going to happen. The point here about that story is that is a story that I picked up years ago when I was back in Ireland. I've adapted a little bit, and I also found a moral in it. But the point for you, I don't normally tell jokes during my presentations, and telling jokes can be dicey at times, especially in today's political climate. What I do try and do is I try and find humorous stories and find the moral in them. And when you're doing your presentations, you don't have to create the humorous story. If you see something else that has made you laugh, either in a book or a movie or something like that, reference that, put your own little spin on it and personalize it, but then try and create a moral in the story as well. A few other points about that story. When I ask people, I say Patrick goes out to the garage and he brushes against a lamp, and out of the lamp pops and everyone says, genie. Yeah, like I'm sure most of you did as well, all right? And for quite some time, I was actually using that line, except I was at a Toastmasters meeting here in Chicago. We've got a Toastmasters group called Windy City Professional Speakers, and I rehearsed and presented this story on one occasion. And one of the evaluators, we do round robin evaluations, which are really good. One of the evaluators says, Conor, don't use genie, say leprechaun, okay? And that was gold. Right? So again, that was not me coming up with the really humorous line there. It was someone else using it. But then what I did was I captured it and I used it. So remember, you don't have to create your own humor. We'll give you some ideas as to how to do it in a few minutes time, but you don't have to create your own humor. I spoke about the 10 to 15 comedy writers that Stephen Colbert, James Corden, etc. have got. Do we have any Seinfeld fans here? Okay, Michael, Barbara, etc. He's actually written or published just a really good book in the last couple of weeks called Is This Anything? And if you know anything about Seinfeld's writing process, what Seinfeld does literally 5 days a week is he'll go into his office somewhere, and I think he lives in California somewhere. He goes into his office, he takes out a yellow legal pad and he writes for 3 or 4 hours. He'll start with just one idea and he'll try and scope it out, going this direction, going that direction, going this direction, etc. Some kind of associated words that might tie in with what he's thinking about, but he will work for 2 or 3, 4 hours a day trying to craft his material. If you're interested, the book he has just published is called Is This Anything? And what he's actually done in the book is that Jerry Seinfeld has got gazillion yellow legal pads. He's kept everything that he has written since the 1970s, early 1980s. And in the book, he's actually just written down all of his jokes and published them. And actually, if you think about it, they're not really jokes, they're kind of observations of life. What I found interesting, I drop in and try and watch Johnny Carson from time to time when we're on the channels here. And Seinfeld was actually on an episode last week, one of the earlier times he was on Johnny Carson. And he was telling a story about Halloween and going around collecting candy, etc. That story is actually in the book, Is This Anything? And he almost did a word for word on Johnny Carson. point is that he spends a lot of time prepping his material. You need to spend time prepping your material. Now, how do you prep material? One of the ways to do it is make sure that you've got a pen and pencil or an iPhone, Android, or whatever it is. On my iPhone here, I have got a file called Adden Humur. Okay, and every time I think of something that's humorous, I pop it into this iPhone here. Correction, Connor. Every time you think of something humorous that you remember to pop into the iPhone, you put it into the iPhone then. Because what happens is that if I don't put it in immediately, I think about it, 5 minutes later, all I know is I said something that I thought was funny, I've forgotten what it is, and I can't remember. So if you can develop a discipline that says, all right, I am going to win the next humorous speech competition. But to do that, I got to do what Patrick didn't do. I've got to buy the metaphorical lottery ticket. For you, the metaphorical lottery ticket is the note-taking and capturing of material that you think is funny. And now the point is, you don't always know when you're going to use it, but what you've got is you've got a bank of material that you might be able to use sometime, somewhere, change it ever so slightly, etc. Okay, now I'm going to do some more screen share in a couple of seconds time, but does anyone have any questions so far on what I have covered? Do I need to clarify anything? Does it make sense to you? One of the things, by the way, I also should say is that when I got the original call from Tom Jemison to do this presentation, I actually thought it was a whiskey presentation we were going to be doing with his Jemison name. And of course, he then tells me I'm going to be speaking at 10 o'clock Chicago time to a group over in California. I should be in bed. Well, actually, I don't go to bed this early, but anyway. So does anyone have any questions they want to ask before I do some more screen share? Is this making sense to you? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see now what we got. Yeah. And we now go to the screen share again. Tell me about Patrick, Connor. Okay, we did that. No, the lessons from that, we've basically covered them. It's an old story. Pay attention to old stories that you remember. It's relevant and it's clean. You can use it anywhere. Find the moral in your jokes and adapt them, enhance them, or personalize them as you need to. One other point about the humor. I come from Ireland, where we're a bit more blasé and easygoing about, shall we say, profanity, okay? The Irish are pretty used to dropping F-bombs left, right, and center. In fact, a good Irish person can can put 3 F-bombs into a 4-word sentence. If you want coaching on that later on, I can provide it, but I won't do it now. But one of the other things, though, is that the way I adapted that story to the US audience. Originally, when I was telling the story, I was saying that Patrick ran into financial difficulties. He started praying to God, looking for some help and support. After a couple of days, the heavens opened. God came, looked down and said, Patrick, what can I do with you? So instead of using the leprechaun, I was using the God reference. I was doing a presentation down in Alabama to a very large audience on one occasion. And after the presentation, I was out in the parking lot. I was on a phone call to someone, and I saw one of the women that I knew was at the meeting driving by. But 5 minutes later, she comes back in. I'm just finishing up my phone call. And she said, Mr. Cunneen, I think is what she said, I really enjoyed your presentation, but when you told that story about God, I kind of turned off. And I thought, whoa, I mean, that is really being kind of sensitive. But I do appreciate, though, that some people are that sensitive. I'm still surprised at it. But what I thought was, look, that's a really good story. I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to upset people. And eventually, I thought about using the leprechaun, thanks to the guy in the Windy City Toastmasters as well. So the material you use, you can adapt it and adopt it for each particular audience. The last thing you want to do, especially either a Toastmasters, well, any place, either a Toastmasters club or especially at a corporate engagement, is to offend anyone, because you are not going to get asked back, and you'll get the reputation for being a bit of a screwball or something like that. Right, let's have a look now at where we go from here. Yes, there are the lessons. Right. Now, so all right, we've asked the questions. No one's got any questions. Basic point, decide, I'm going to do it, work at it, and work consistently at it. Now, what I would like to do now is I would like to give you an acronym that spells the word laugh, as you can see here, that provides 5 lessons that will help you to add humor to your presentation. I will just go through them very briefly here initially. Then I want to show you another story that I tell, and then we'll come back and we'll audit that and see how it ties in with the laugh concept. But basically the ideas behind the laugh acronym is, 1, I've already said this, listen. And from now on, if you're serious about trying to add humor to your presentation, just pay attention to what made you laugh today, or what made you laugh tomorrow. What did you say that put a smile on someone's face? And if you think it's any way worth capturing at all, capture it. And just a question here, just open, let's come off mute for a second. Everyone hit the space bar and come off mute. If you just hit the space bar, you'll come off mute. Out of curiosity, what makes you laugh? Anyone want to, what are the kind of things that make you laugh when you're
Shock
with
humor.
Sorry?
Shock humor.
Shock humor. Okay, all right, you'll get together with you later on, okay, Roger, all right. Others, what makes you laugh when you're with friends?
Making fun of myself.
Making fun of yourself, really good. Michael, I like it. Self-deprecation is really good and important. And when you are as I said, depreciating, just like my bank balance at the moment, but when you are self-depreciating or self-deprecating, it does make you more human. And people, if you laugh at yourself, people will laugh with you as well. But if you try to make fun of someone else, it can be very, very dangerous. So I like that. Any other things that make you laugh when you're out with friends?
Surprise outcome.
Surprise outcome. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts?
Clever humor.
Clever humor. Okay.
A good story that happened to someone. A good story.
A good story. All right. Okay. I like that, Jana. And here's the point about a good story. If you consider, God alone knows when we all got together and had a really good laugh, but when you're together with friends and you're laughing, in most cases, I would say 90% of the time, you are not laughing at jokes. Would you agree with that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you're doing is you're laughing at stories. You're laughing at clever humor. You're laughing at surprise endings. You're laughing at quips, etc. And this is the point about adding humor to your presentation. It's not about creating jokes or adding jokes. You can do that. But really what it's about is about life events that when you're with friends having a cup of coffee, or in my case, having a pint of Guinness, soon, Lord, soon. What are the things that you laugh about around the water cooler, around having your low-fat frappuccino with added whipped cream or whatever it is that get you laughing? That's the kind of thing that you can add to your presentations. Now, that brings me to the next element of the laugh acronym. And Jana, you were kind of hitting on it there. Next element is anecdote. And what I would ask you to consider is think of stories that you have heard that you laughed at, or think of stories that someone that you told at around the coffee table or somewhere that had other people laughing. And the next point ties in very, very clearly and closely with anecdote. And this is uncomfortable situations. Now, people do say that, you've probably heard the phrase that comedy is tragedy separated by time. You've heard that phrase, yeah? All right. Now, there's a nugget of truth in it, but I think it is far too extreme because there's really nothing. Tragedy is far too strong a word. It's pretty difficult to laugh about tragedy. You do hear people make the odd joke about the Titanic, etc. But I mean, that was 111 years ago, 109 years ago kind of thing. There's an odd joke might be made about Lincoln and going to the theatre, etc. But really, you don't tell jokes about tragedy. But the nugget of truth in it, though, is that the way to get people laughing is you take a story about you. In a sense, it goes back to self-deprecating, Michael. You tell a story about you where at the time you were really uncomfortable. But now you're actually able to tell your friends about it. They're laughing at it and you're laughing at it as well. That's really the nugget. So for instance, well, I'll give you an example in a couple of minutes time, but how many of you can remember when you were in high school, the jerk that you dated, be it man or woman? A few of you, yeah? Okay, all right. I bet you any money when you were dating that jerk and they broke up with you, you were heartbroken or very, very upset. Now what you do is you tell your friends about that jerk, yeah? And you're laughing at it. That's a kind of simple example of the uncomfortable situation that you can tell stories about. By the way, those of you who weren't laughing at that comment about the jerks, you're probably the jerks, but don't get too offended about it, okay? All right. That's another point, by the way. You can make fun of your audience. You need to be careful who it is and be careful as to what you do say, but don't be afraid to just, the Irish word I use is just josh with the audience from time to time. And I'll give an example of that in a few minutes. Okay, so let's go back to, so we got listen, we have got anecdote, we have got an anecdote where you were uncomfortable. The next one I would ask you to do is to, when you're looking for content, Google on the Bing. Okay, all right. Now, basic idea here is that we're not trying to create our own original material. We're trying to take material that is some way humorous and bring it into our humorous presentation. One of the best ways to do that is to get onto the Googler and Google on the Bing, all right, for something related to your situation. So let's say, Barbara, you're obviously, if you use humor well, but I mean, customer service, which is your sweet point, my God, the number of humorous stories that can be told about customer service is just phenomenal. And I've seen you present. I saw you actually in Kuala Lumpur when you got your accredited speaker. I traveled to Kuala Lumpur representing Chicago for the semifinals of the World Championship of Public Speaking. Do you know it's not a very good idea to travel for 22 hours from Chicago to Kuala Lumpur to do a 7-minute speech and then travel back 24 hours later having done a 7-minute speech? Not a good idea, my people. But anyway, that's life. But the basic point is that if whatever industry you're in, Sonny, can I ask you, what industry are you in?
I'm a business consultant.
Okay, all right. If you're doing presentations going forward, I would just get a Google on the Bing, as I like to say, all right, for funny stories related to business consultants. I promise you'll find something there that you can drop in an appropriate way. You don't have to force them in, but you'll probably find something that will help you. I'll give you a few other examples of how this can work in a few minutes' time. Suzanne, what business are you in? You're muted.
Social work.
Okay, all right. And now, funny stories about social work that might be a bit more challenging.
Challenging, yes.
But what you could do is, I mean, you could do funny stories maybe about, I don't know, maybe lawyers or something. God love us, they're always involved in social work as well, and that kind of thing. But the point I really want to keep pushing to you is that you got to decide to do it. You got to do it consistently. And when you make the effort, it will happen. The other thing is, if you're doing a humorous speech, so you got 5 to 7 minutes to convince the judges that you're the funniest person in the district, how many laughs do you think you need to get in a humorous speech? And by the way, there's no right answer to this. Ed is saying 3. I know it seems like a low number, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but why do you say that, Ed? You're muted. Yeah.
It's just our standard go-to in Toastmasters. Everything seems to be in 3, so it just made sense to me to say 3.
Okay. All right. Anyone else got any thoughts as to how many times you want to get the audience to laugh?
One of our people did a study on a number of humorous speeches that had to be done at least 20 or 30 in a 7-minute speech.
Right. Okay. That would be something to laugh if you got that kind of situation going. I mean, I did win a humorous speech competition a few years back. It was the title of the speech. Actually, all of you Californians will love this. It was Barbara, you'll love it. Okay. It was titled "Customer Service in San Quentin Jail." Okay. All right. And that one really rocked the audience. I don't believe I got 20 laughs in it. But the point, though, about adding humor to your presentation, if you're doing a standard Toastmasters presentation, I genuinely do think that if you can get the audience laughing, Ed said 3 times during a 7-minute speech, people will think afterwards, hey, that was a really fun, humorous speech. So don't go trying to get a laugh every 10, 15 seconds. Comedians try to do that and they don't always succeed. If you can get the audience laughing 3 or 4 times in your speech, especially if it's just a standard international speech competition, you are going to have people saying, hey, she is really funny. He is really funny as well. Okay. Now, one other point about writing speeches before I go into the next element of the Laugh acronym is I say to people, and I get kind of strange looks then when I say it, I say, don't try and write a funny speech. Write a speech where you're going to get your content across, your message across, and then see how can you add humor to that speech. So take one of your better speeches. If you want to win the humor speech competition the next time, maybe take one of your favorite speeches and ask yourself, how can I actually adopt and adapt this speech? Maybe I can pull 2 minutes out of the speech and drop in a story that I know got a laugh from my friends a couple of weeks ago that is relevant to it. And that's kind of what you should be trying to do, in my opinion. All right. So let's then have a look at the next one. And as we go to so we say, Google and the Bing. The last one is when you say something and you hear just a he from the audience, you have got the nugget of something there that you can build into a ho, ho, ho. All right. Now, one of the things that often happens with me when I'm doing presentations, I think I'm pretty good at ad-libbing and at quipping. But as Mark Twain, someone mentioned Mark Twain earlier on, I'm a big Mark Twain fan. I've written 2 books on Twain. But Twain did say that he would write out his impromptu speech about 1 week in advance. Okay, so that one of the best speakers in the world actually would write out his impromptu speech 1 week in advance. What I do is I've got a good idea what most of my speech material is. I know when I'm doing stories on business or marketing or otherwise, if I drop in a story, when people are going to laugh. But also what happens though is that I'll make a quip from time to time and get a reaction from the audience that maybe necessarily wasn't expecting. But what I do is I pay attention to that line and say, wow, they found that quite funny. Or they maybe found it very, very funny, one or the other. But the thing that they found a little bit funny, and I record a lot of my material when I'm presenting, the thing that I found a little bit funny, I'll go back on that later on and I'll figure out, is there some way that I can build that into a bigger laugh? It might be just using one additional word to telling the final punchline. It might be taking out 2 words out of it to tighten it up. Because one of the real rules, important rules of humor is, I remember a comedian friend of mine saying it on one occasion, he said, you should audition every word in your set. And good comics have no superfluous words in their set. If you're telling a good, funny story, the tighter it is, the better it's going to be as well. So there will be some suggestions for you. Now, let's have a look here. So how many of you will be able to remember at least the word laugh as an acronym out of this? Okay. All right. So listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, Google on the Bing, and the last one is going from he 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 to ho ho ho. Now, what I like to do now is I want to show you a clip of a story that I tell in most of my presentations as well, and then we'll do a little audit on it, see how it ties in with the Laugh acronym, and we'll go from there. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions so far on what I have covered? Stunned into silence. Okay, let's see what we got here now. Coming up, and now let's go to the share situation again. And yes, all right. So this is a story. You'll see the logic behind the story, and you can see how it can be used almost anywhere going forward. Bear with me for 1 second. Did I set that up properly? Have I got the sound sorted? Go back again, Conor. We have. Oh my God, he's doing wonderful here today. He's doing wonderful. Yes. No, we don't want my premiere. We don't. Where has it gone to? Sorry. That's my video editing suite there. Where'd you put it, Conor? Good man. You're doing very well. You really are doing very well. Okay.
If you ask yourself, what do I want my attitude to be when things go wrong? You're not going to say, I want to be annoyed, I want to be upset. When you ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? You're more likely to say, I don't want to be angry, I don't want to be annoyed about this. And having answered that way, you will make some effort not to be angry and not to be frustrated. And I'll give you an example where it helped me a couple of years ago. I was driving in the western suburbs of Chicago in heavy rush hour traffic. Came to a set of traffic lights, turned left at the traffic lights, and a few seconds after turning left, I noticed in my rear view mirror a mobile discotheque. Cop car, flashing lights. So I pulled to the slower lane, he pulled to the slower lane. And I remember saying to myself, well, Holy St. Patrick and St. Bridget. Bit of respect there, please. Holy St. Patrick and St. Bridget, what could that fine officer of the law want from an upstanding citizen like me? Now, that was the gist of what I was thinking. I may have said just one four-letter word, but for those of you whose mind is in the gutter, the word was oops, which, as you all know, stands for uh-oh, police, stop. Right, so I pulled into a little small parking lot at the side of the road, and as I was pulling in, I said to myself, now why does he want to speak to me? And the only reason I could figure why he might want to speak to me was when I had turned left at the traffic lights. They were slightly red, but not by a whole lot now, mind you. So, he is there on his computer checking me to see if, in my case, I'm a member of the Irish Republican Army, or even worse, a Cubs fan. Go White Sox! I have to tell you, depending on who I'm speaking to, I obviously try and put in a kind of an answer to that gets a reaction. But when I was speaking up near the Green Bay area a couple of years ago, I made the comment that the cop was checking to see if I was a member of the Irish Republican Army, or worse, a Packers fan. I didn't think I would get out of that room alive. So he was there checking my computer to see what my record was like. And I asked myself the question that I said you should ask when things go wrong. So I asked myself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? And I said there's no point in being antsy and annoyed about this. He probably doesn't understand the concept of slightly red lights. So in my side mirror, I see him walking up towards me. And this being Chicagoland area, I prayed that he had an Irish name. I prayed that he had this vision of Ireland, that the roads are still unpaved, that milk is brought to the creamery via donkey and cart, and that traffic lights, if they exist at all, are, well, basically advisory. I look up. Officer Schmidt, who proceeded to tell me in minute detail what I had done wrong. He asked for my license and he asked for my insurance. Now, none of this is made up, I promise you. I had asked myself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? As he is looking at my license, he says to me, "Sir, I like your attitude." I'm thinking, woohoo, I'm getting away with this. Then he looks at my insurance and he says, "Sir, your insurance certificate is out of date." My wife normally looks after that, officer. He smiled. I think he realized he was dealing with one more administratively incompetent husband. Ladies, you know the story, I'm sure. And he just handed back the insurance certificate to me and he said, "Look, take it easy on that one." Now, I should tell you that this event happened on the 16th of March. Okay? One day before St. Patrick's Day. So the rest of the conversation went as follows. We're having great, good fun, and as you will see, it continued that way. So the rest of the conversation went, "How much will this cost me, officer?" He said, "I'll cite you for the red light. I'll leave you go on the insurance. That'll cost you $75, sir." $75? Do you know how many pints of Guinness I can get tomorrow for $75? The guy cracked up laughing. I think he thought I was on crystal meth. And he said to me, "Sir, if I was to cite you for the red light and the lack of insurance, this would be significantly more expensive. You'd have to go to a traffic court." So I said, "Thank you, I appreciate the break you're giving me." I pulled into a very small parking lot with only one access and egress, so I had to turn the car around and drive by Officer Schmidt. As I drove by Officer Schmidt, I kid you not, he waved to me with a genuine smile. That was how the conversation had gone. And I said, "This is crazy. This guy's waving to me with a genuine smile and he's after fining me $75. And I waved back to him with a genuine smile saying, "This is really crazy. He's fined me $75 and I'm waving back to him." But what Officer Schmidt, though, would not have known was that for only $75, I had got a really memorable anecdote about the importance of asking yourself a really powerful question when things go wrong. And when things go wrong, and they will for every single person in this room at some stage, the question to ask yourself is, what do I want my attitude to be? It's a powerful question. If you get stuck in a traffic jam on the 88 this afternoon or 3:55 or going home, and there's nothing you can do about it, ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude?
Okay, you can see the story there and the impact of it. Now, if I had just stood in front of an audience that says, you've got to be able to choose your attitude, and the way to choose your attitude is ask yourself, what do I want my attitude to be? What are the chances of people remembering that tomorrow? Now, the question I do ask, and I'm going to ask everyone here now as well after I tell that story, and then we'll do a little post-mortem on it. What are the chances of you tomorrow, just by show of hands, what are the chances of you, well, assuming we're out driving tomorrow, what are the chances of you tomorrow seeing someone stopped at the side of the road with a mobile discotheque behind them? Pretty high? Yeah, all right. What I say, again reinforcing the comment, is the next time you see that mobile discotheque and are driving by it, remember the question that that person should be asking themselves, what do I want my attitude to be? And you're going to see a mobile discotheque on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The more you ask yourself the question, think about what do I want my attitude to be, you'll be able to bring it into the workplace and into your environment as well. And that's the power of a good storytelling there. Now, a couple of points about that story. I did say, I'll do a little bit more forensics in a couple of seconds time. I did say, I sometimes put in quips that get a reaction that then turn out to be really funny. When I told the story about the Packers, I was up in Packerland and I said the cop was checking to see if I was a member of the Irish Republican Army or even worse, a Packers fan. The audience laughed. At one of the presentations, I said, just in passing, I didn't think I would get out of that room alive up in Green Bay. If you can recall this video there, and I can give you a link to it later on, that line gets a huge laugh. Now, what is funny about, I didn't think I would get out of that room alive. Take it just as one sentence, there's nothing funny about it. But when you actually juxtapose it with the kind of previous content, that's when it really clicks. But that's an example of something I just said in passing one time I realized, hey, that got a good, really good reaction. And as a result of that. Okay, the other one I talk about speaking about making fun of your audience. When I'm in Chicago, that was in Chicago, that the video you saw there, I made fun of the Cubs. When I'm in California, I would make a comment like, the cop was checking to see if I was a member of the Irish Republican Army, or even worse, a Dodgers fan, okay? Or even worse, something like a one of the other teams from Lakers or something like that, all right? So what I do is actually, the basic thing I do, I mean, I've got a pretty good idea what most of the sports teams are in around the country these days, but if I'm going to a city that maybe mightn't have a big sports franchise or a state, I will actually Google on the Bing major sports teams in this state, etc., and try and, or if it's not a sports team, I can come up with a university. Okay, so there's no major professional sports team in Alabama, I think, but there's Alabama University. Okay, that kind of thing. Now, let's have a quick look at. I'm conscious of time. On no, I want to do something else. I want to show a different slide. Forgive me. Can we get it? Yeah, it's from actually a different presentation. That's Patrick. Okay. I titled the speech "The Mobile Disco," and just a couple of things about it. I was checking my side mirror. I saw the cop coming towards me, and I prayed that he had an Irish name. So what I did was I exaggerated the heritage there, exaggerated my expectations. I now put in a line into that story that you didn't see there, but I say, I pray that the cop's firstborn child was just christened last Saturday, and the child's name was Murphy Flynn O'Flaherty. That actually gets a much better laugh than some of the other ones I've done there. The insurance, when he said your insurance is out of date, I looked up at him and said, my wife looks after that. That normally gets a very good reaction, but I always make sure, though, that I'm seen to be the total idiot at the end of the presentation, though. And I'll tell another funny story about what happens when I went back and told my darling wife that I had got the ticket. But relationships, I tell quite a few stories about my relationship with my wife during these presentations. And as was preferenced, I think, by Michael, I'm always the guy that turns out to be the idiot at the end of it. The $75 asking the question, do you know how many pints of Guinness I can get for $75? That again is playing to my heritage, to people's perception of the Irish being drinkers, etc. Another one that is interesting on this, and this is about just changing the way I change my material from time to time. I said to the cop, $75 pint of Guinness. Do you know how many? I said the cop thought I must have been smoking crystal meth. Okay, that got a huge laugh. I actually rarely use that line anymore, because what I now use, I said that the cop, I think, thought I was smoking something, which does not get as funny a laugh, believe it or not. But the reason why I dropped the crystal meth is I realized as going around the country, there's so much of the country that's been decimated by crystal meth. I just thought it was a kind of a cheap laugh to get. So in that sense, what I did there was I kind of sacrificed the funny laugh for one that would also be funny, but I didn't want to be kind of making the audience feel uncomfortable or upset in that kind of a way. So that's just the examples there of the way that if you take that story and tie it in with laugh, okay? I think the first few times I told that story would have been just to friends, and there was some kind of humor popped into it. I then realized, hey, I can probably bring this to a presentation. The first few times I did that, I got reasonable laughs, and I developed it over a period of time as I heard what would improve it by listening to our audience reaction and getting a few comments from people as well. So that L is for laugh. A is for anecdote. It's obviously an anecdote where I was, uncomfortable. Okay. G then is for Google. I would Google things like something about the place I was speaking to that would allow me to add it into the presentation. And the H is taking something that might have got a small little titter initially that I built into something big. I'm going to have to leave it there again because we're running out of time. But does anyone have any questions or comments before we say, I'm going walking the road again? This, by the way, is the Chicago equivalent of the 401, by the way. Okay. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, you have to be just a little bit outrageous, but know where the red line is.
That's true. And the problem with the red line these days, Tim, is there's got a lot closer to you. So you got to be really careful on the red line. Anyone got any other comments or thoughts?
Connor, yes, one of the best humorists in a lot of humor contests, but one of the best humorous responses is applied to something that I never really thought of in the formula. And you used the word uncomfortable, and the presentation that I did that got such great reaction humor-wise was I dressed extremely conservatively and role-played an area governor visiting the worst club in the world. And then, of course, they did all of those things that you as an area governor would tell them, don't do this, and make sure you have a guest book, and, be prepared to start on all those things. And they were doing everything wrong. And so you can see the uncomfortable nature that I was in visiting this unbelievably big club and making all the mistakes that you might have made. I misidentified somebody by gender, and you did everything wrong, and you were still suffering through it. So the audience really got a kick out of that. Yeah, and what you were doing there, I think probably, Tom, to some extent as well, as you're looking at taking some of the pain points. I'm sure everyone on this call thinks that the Toastmasters pathways is the bee's knees and the cat's pajamas. Yeah, everyone loves it. No. I can drop that into every single presentation at a Toastmasters club, and I get that kind of reaction from you, because I mean it's like kind of driving people crazy. So if you can find a pain point and then play it back somewhere or other, that's another way to really connect with your audience as well. But again, as Tim was kind of highlighting, you got to be careful about, you mentioned the red line, you got to be careful about that as well. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, I will hand it back to Mr. Jemison, or is it to our Toastmaster we're heading back to? Sonny?